Thank you for joining us. We're going to Pesach Seder to go through the Halachos of the Seder. This is an extension of the daily halacha program, which we have a daily audio shir on various halacha topics. Before Yom Tovim, we discussed about the Yom Tovim, and during the rest of the year, we're using the Chai Adam as a basis to discuss many different halachas. But we decided, together with the audio shir, the preparation for the Seder, which we put on the archives from last year. We're also going to do an extra video shir to see if we can help you understand more clearly the various halachas of the Seder, how to apply them practically l'maisa. Thank you for joining us. So we're going to start with the positioning of the Ka'orah, and there are different minhagim in regards to the positioning of the Ka'orah. The standard minhag which we follow is the minhag of the Rizal, which puts the Zroya on the upper right and the Bay on the upper left. Then you have all the way over to the left, you're going to have what you're going to be using for karpas. You're going to have the mortar actually a little bit above that, in the middle. The karpas on the left and the charesis on the right. And then the chazeris, which you also use for mortar, on the bottom. Now, the ka'orah is supposed to be actually what the person is going to be eating from. So a person should use the chazeris, which is on the ka'orah, for the purpose of using for mortar. He should use the karpas on the ka'orah for the purpose of karpas. He should use the charosis on the ka'orah for the purpose of charosis. And actually, the person should eat the egg. The Mishnah Berurah says we use it for a mitzvah, to discard it afterwards would not be appropriate. A person should eat the egg during the meal. A person should eat the egg. You cannot eat the zroya during the meal because roasted meat cannot be eaten during Pesach by the Seder, because it would look like you're trying to eat from the Korban Pesach. But it can be eaten the next day. So a person preferably should not discard it. A person should eat it. A person wants to keep it for both nights, he could do so, and then eat it the following day. Besides that, we're also going to need some salt water, which we're dipping the karpas into, and then we're going to different sized kosos, which we're going to use for the dalet kosos. Moving on from that, we move on to the first step of the Seder is Kadesh. There's a minute some people have to say out beforehand the 15 simonim of the Seder, Kadesh, Urchatz, Karpas, Yachatz, etc. And some people have a minute before they get to each step to speak out, say what that step is. That's not required. That some people have such a minute. The halacha brings down the person should have the table set before. But by daytime, so when he comes home to start the Seder, he can start the Seder immediately, and the children shouldn't get bored. And we want to do the mitzvah. The mitzvah of the night is to have the children involved, speaking to them, etc. So we want the children to stay awake. So we want to have the table set so they can start. We can start the Seder immediately, so the children can be involved. So the first step of the Seder is Kadesh. So the mitzvah is to say Kiddush, which is the mitzvah we have in every Yom Tov, Shabbos and every Yom Tov. We also have, besides that, it's one of the dalet kosos. So a person will have two things in mind when he has in mind to fulfill the mitzvah. We have a concept called mitzvah sichos kavanah. A person should have in mind to fulfill the mitzvah. So what mitzvah is he having in mind? He's having in mind two mitzvahs. He's having in mind the mitzvah of Kiddush, of Yom Tov, the first kos, and he's also having in mind for the first of the dalet kosos. When a person makes Kiddush, the requirement of the cup should hold a revius. That's the first step. We have to figure out how large a revius is. And interesting enough, there are different calculations how to figure out how large a revius is. But since the first cup this year is Friday night, it's a mitzvah d'oraisa to say Kiddush on Friday night. So therefore, the Mishnah Berurah says when we come to measuring the revius for Friday night, we have to use a larger revius than we're going to use for all of the four other kosos. So really, a person can use a larger cup for the first kos and then switch to a smaller cup for the second kos. So the first kos, because it's the raisa, we're going to use a larger calculation for the revius. How large does it have to be? So according to Moshe Feinstein, that share should be 4.4 fluid ounces. So this cup holds 5 fluid ounces. So we would fill that cup all the way up to the top. The person wants to fill the cup all the way up to the top. The kos should be mole. Now, in regards to drinking the kos, so there's something unique about the night of the Seder, more than the rest of the year. In general, a person has a kos of mitzvah. The kos has to hold a revius, but besides the kos holding revius, the amount the person has to drink is what's called mole lugmav. Mole lugmav is a personal measurement based on the person's a cheekful, one cheekful. The assumption is that it's at least a majority of a revius, possibly more if the person is larger, not less than that. Okay, so that person only has to drink of a revius. That's the smaller revius that person has to drink. So we calculate a smaller revius as being 3 ounces. So a person has to drink 1.6 ounces, and that's enough. By the night of the Seder, however, it's preferred that a person should drink the whole kais. And if not the whole kais, at least the majority of the kais. So the larger your kais is going to be, the more you're going to have to drink. We prefer the person should use wine. The person also has the mitzvah to mekayim the mitzvahs of the Seder. So we don't want him imbibing so much wine, so don't use such a large cup. So it's preferable to use a cup which is the right size but not larger. So therefore a person will use the first cup, he will use a cup which holds 4.5 ounces, and that would be sufficient. And then afterwards, the second cup and onwards, he can use a smaller cup, a cup which holds 3 ounces. Originally, Moshe Feinstein was on record to say that the calculation was 3.3 ounces. And afterwards, his son, Rav David Feinstein, revised that and said that the shear of 2.9 ounces is sufficient for the second kos. So it's not very large. This is the amount that a person would want to use for the second kos and onwards. It's very easy that a person can fulfill the concept of drinking the whole kos. When a person takes this very large cup that he got as a present, from his tanta, and it's 10 ounces, that's not a smart idea, because then you should be drinking 10 ounces. So we want to try and use the right size and not more than that. Okay. And any other year where Pesach does not fall out Friday night, the Seder, or the second night this year, Motzi Shabbos, then your person can use a smaller cup for all 4 koses. Okay. When the person says Kiddush, he should have in mind, when he says to fulfill the mitzvah of Kiddush and the mitzvah of the Dalet Koses, a person should have in mind when he says the Shechayonu, which we say in the Kiddush, not only for the Yom Tov, which we say Shechayonu on the Yom Tov, which is what we always do, but besides that on the mitzvahs of the nighttime, which would be the Dalet Koses, the mitzvah of Matzah, the mitzvah of Morer, and the mitzvah of Haggadah. So we have the mitzvah and the mitzvah of Halal. So we have the mitzvah of Matzah, Morer, Dalet Koses, Haggadah, and Halal. 5 mitzvahs the person will have in mind when he says the Shechayanu at that point in time. When the person drinks the Dalet Koses, the person should drink it by Haseva. Now I want to point something about Haseva. If a person sits in a chair which does not have an armrest, so if a person has a chair with an armrest, he's going to be supported when he leans. If a person sits in a chair without an armrest, which sometimes that's the truth, that's the chair you're given. So if a person leans like this, the person will not fulfill the mitzvah of Haseva, because he's not being supported. He's in the air. That's not Haseva. So a person would have to turn himself towards the back of the chair to be supported. Preferably a person should have a pillow with him. So a person could do like this, and then it's much easier at that point in time to actually drink the kos when he's being supported like that. So the Haseva has to be something which is comfortable. It's not comfortable, it cannot be cheirus. So a person should have a pillow, but a person should make sure that they're sitting in either a chair with an armrest and leaning on the armrest, or they're sitting in a chair, they're turning themselves towards the back of the chair. What should you use for the Dalet Koses? Preferably, you should use something which has alcohol content. Moshe Feinstein Zatzal held that besides the regular halacha of Kiddush, which does not require alcohol content, by the night of the Seder, there's an inyan of cheirus. The more talks about that this should show freedom, and that usually means a person eats something which would be intoxicating, drinking something which would be intoxicating. So it has to have alcohol content. Other poskim disagree with him and hold that a person can use regular grape juice, but if a person could use wine, a person should use wine. If a person finds difficulty using straight wine, he could mix the wine with grape juice, and that would also be sufficient. Preferably the color of the wine should be red, and we find the pasuk says that red wine is considered more choshev, unless you would have, and where you are, only the white wines are more choshev than the red wines, then you should use a white wine. According to Rav Yosef, even in that situation, a person should use a red wine. Preferably, even in that situation, a person should use a red wine. A person cannot drink between the first cup and the second cup unless he had intent to drink at that point in time when he made the Kiddush. So a person is a person who has some type of health issue and he must drink during the Haggadah to help him say the Haggadah. A person should have in mind when he says the Kiddush that he's planning to have drinking water during the Haggadah period. even in that situation, a person should not preferably drink wine or something which could be used for the mitzvah of Kiddush. A person should preferably drink water, something of that sort. If a person is weak and a person would want to eat something after Kiddush, he may do so. Preferably that's only if somebody who has a need to do so. The women are chayiv in the mitzvah of dalat kosos, just like men, and children are also chayiv. What age are the children chayiv from? From the time that we can speak to them about the mitzvah of the Seder, and they'll understand it. So, probably the age of 5 or 6, a child would be considered chayiv in the mitzvah of Haggadah and the Seder. The size of the cup the child has to use has to hold a revius. You can use a smaller size revius for that purpose, but the child will drink a mole lugma of himself. So a cheekful of a child is much smaller. An ounce worth would probably be sufficient for that age to be considered that the child has enough. Normally only one person says Kiddush, only one person has the kos. Here we're going to have by the night of the Seder, everybody's going to have their own kos. So everybody should hold their kos, even though only one person is saying the Kiddush, everybody should hold their kos while the one who's saying the Kiddush will be saying the Kiddush. After Kaddish comes Urchatz. A person has to wash his hands in order to eat the karpas. So normally, during the year, some people are not makbid on washing for something which is dipped in liquid, other than bread. We wash for bread. We also wash an halacha for something which is dipped into a mashke. During the year, some people are not machmer on it, but at least on the night of the Seder, everybody's going to be machmer on that halacha. We're going to wash again before the Suda. We're going to make a bracha then. So how do we make a bracha then the second time when we just washed earlier with a valid form of washing? So the Pri Megadim says the person should have in mind that this washing, which he's doing now, does not work for the meal. The Mishnah Berurah suggests that besides that, a person should have in mind, when a person comes to Rachza before the meal, the person can do certain actions which will make him chayiv in a nunatila. So we will talk about that when we get to Rachza. We do not make a bracha on this washing. This washing, we do not make a bracha. Many times, a person makes a mistake and he makes a bracha. So if a person would mistakenly make the bracha on the natila for the karpas, a person should be careful to eat a kazayas. A person should eat a kazayas in this situation, because according to all opinions, if a person eats less than a kazayas, there's no chiyuv to make a bracha on this natila. It would be a bracha lebatola. If a person would eat a kazayas, according to some opinions, a person would make a bracha when he washes for a kazayas. So at least in that way, it will not be a bracha lebatola. After Urchatz is karpas. Now, even though a person is not making a bracha, a person should not be masiach das from the time that he washed until he eats the karpas. Preferably, a person should not have a conversation over there which we're going to let himself be distracted and lose his focus on keeping his hands in the proper level of kedusha. So therefore, a person does not need to be quiet during that time, but a person, it would be preferred to be quiet, as a person should not get involved in what's known as hesach hadas. For karpas, what should the person use for karpas? So my suggestion, the person should use celery for karpas. I preferred in halacha that historically people use the potato because they did not really have fresh vegetables, but the Gemara refers to it as a vegetable, a yorak. So it has to be something which is green. Preferably it should be something which is not raw. Which is raw and not cooked. So potatoes would not be the preferred option in that situation. Some people have a minute to use parsley. Parsley nowadays is going to be questionable because people do not eat parsley, and therefore the bracha probably is not hadama, it is shahakol. And since our goal is to make a bracha of hadama, we do not want to use parsley. So that brings us back to celery. So a person is going to take the celery and dip it into the salt water. If this person is a person who's normally very careful to eat these type of things with a fork, he should not do so the night of the Seder. Because the idea is that since your hands are touching something which is wet, you need to wash your hands. Well, my hands are not going to touch it. It could be I don't have to wash. So it's better the person this should be a finger food for the night of the Seder as opposed to any other time. The chachila, the piece that you take, should be less than a kazayas. It should be a small piece. This obviates the need to get involved in whether you need to say bracha achrona on the karpas. You said the karpas you ate it before the meal. You do not eat anything of that sort during the meal, theoretically. and maybe you need to say a brand of fashos afterwards, so you eat less of the kazayas, and there's no question that you not make a brand of fashos. If a person did eat a kazayas, he still will not make the brand of fashos. When the person says the bracha of Brei Adoma on the karpas, so he should have in mind for the morah as well. So he's going to have in mind not only for the karpas, the Adoma, but the bracha will go for the morah, which he's going to eat later on as well. Do you eat karpas b'haseva? So this is an interesting question. The minhag is not to. The minhag is to eat karpas without haseva. Reb Chaim Brisker actually held you should eat karpas with haseva, because the reason why we dip before the meal, the Gemara says, is because we are acting like royalty, where they can afford to have a snack before the meal. So we're acting like royalty, that we should eat it with haseva, and that would be the appropriate way to do that. But again, the minhag is not like that, Reb Chaim Brisker, and the minhag is not to eat it without haseva. After karpas comes yachatz. So a person has eaten his karpas, and we move to yachatz. So now, let's talk about the matzahs. So how many matzahs do we use for the night of the Seder? We use 3 matzahs for the night of the Seder. That is our minhag. We put 3 matzahs here under our matzah cover, and we're now going to open it up, take out the middle matzah. We're going to break it into 2 pieces. The halacha is that the smaller piece should be at least a kazayas. So we want to be careful. It's not that we break it not into one very large piece and one small piece, which is less than a kazayas. We want to break it in such a way that even the smaller piece is going to be left for kazayas. We're going to eventually use this for the mitzvah of karech, or the mitzvah. The smaller piece will be used for the mitzvah of motzi matzah, for the mitzvah motzi matzah, and we want to have enough to eat a kazayas from the smaller matzah. So how big does this actually, this piece which we're going to use for motzi matzah, how large does it have to be? So it's a hard question to figure out how to measure, translate a kazayas, which is volume, into a matzah. A matzah is not a very easy thing to figure out the volume of a matzah. So there are 3 approaches to how to figure out the volume of a matzah. One approach is to crumble the matzah up, and then I can put into a cup based on volume. That's not so practical for us to do the night of the Seder. The second approach is to plasticize our matzah and see how much water it displaces. Also not very logical for the night of the Seder. The third possibility is, can we find a way to weigh it? Now, the shirim of matzah are shirim in volume, they're not shirim of weight. But even though they're shirim of volume and not of weight, maybe there's some way we can figure out the volume based on the weight. And that's what we want to see if we can do. Now, a person has a digital scale, which we're going to use. A person cannot use it by the Seder, obviously. If a person has a mechanical scale, a person can use that on Yom Tov or Shabbos, even though normally you're not allowed to measure on Yom Tov or Shabbos. For the purpose of mitzvah, a person is allowed to measure on Yom Tov or Shabbos. So we measured this before. We measured that the average hand matzah, when you get a matzah which comes 9 to a pound, the weight of the hand matzah is about 32 grams, 32 grams. So Rav Yosef understands that the share of a kazayas is by weight, and he says that the share is 30 grams. So basically, 1 matzah would be your share. That's quite large. And most of the person do not accept that calculation. For the mitzvah which we're dealing with over here, we're going to eat 2. We're going to eat later on 2 kazayisim, 1 from the top matzah, 1 from the middle matzah. We can calculate a much smaller kazayis and use that for these purposes. For our purposes, this kazayis is going to be actually about 13 grams worth of weight. So we're going to break our matzah in such a way that we have about 13 grams. And if this will cooperate, there we go, grams. So here we have already, this is 21 grams. You see this amount over here is 21 grams, which is much more than we need. So you get idea of what size we're looking for. And here we get 16 grams. And this is about the size that you're looking for. So a person wants to get a piece of matzah, which will look about that large. So that's the goal that we want. We have the smaller size should be about that large, and that we're going to put back in between our 2 matzahs. The larger piece is put away for the purpose of tzafun. And we now proceed from yachatz to magid. One last point about the yachatz that if a person is limited on their shleimim, you could take a broken matzah to start with for the middle matzah, so you're not really breaking it by yachatz. It's already broken beforehand. So a person needs to do that. They're limited in their shleimim, so a person could do that. Even though the mitzvahs of the night, moving on to Magid, even though the mitzvahs of the night are, many of them are done with Haseva, Magid must be done without Haseva. Magid is the person is standing with Ema and Yira in front of his Creator, talking to his Creator, and so he sits with awe. Before the person starts Magid, the person will have in mind to be Mekayim the mitzvah of Sipri Shiyas Mitzrayim, which is a mitzvah de'oraisa. The Torah refers to matzah as lechem oni. And one of the explanations of lechem oni is lechem onim alav dvarim harbe. It's a lechem which many things are said upon it, which Chazal understand that to mean that the matzah is there by the Seder, and we're talking about the matzah is there. Therefore the matzah should be uncovered during the Haggadah. There are moments when we cover the matzah, whenever we pick up the kais, we cover the matzah, the similar idea which we have by Friday night, and by we make Kiddush, that Friday night, Shabbos day, Yom Tov, that when the kais is being held, it's an element of, there's some element of busha to the lechem, so we cover the lechem. When we want to have the matzah on the table, so the matzah which you're going to use for the korah should be on the table. 3 matzahs. But what about the fact that you have many guests and they're going to be eating matzah as well? So some suggest that not only all of the lechem we eat tonight has to be lechem only, has to be lechem which we spoke about. So all of the matzah which you're planning to use should be placed somewhere on the table. During Magid, a person preferably should not speak anything other than the Haggadah. The person should not be Mesiach Das from the process of talking about the Haggadah. Women are chayiv in the mitzvah of Haggadah, just like men are chayiv in the mitzvah of Haggadah. Sometimes the woman wants to step out to just check on the food, see everything is okay. So what is the minimal amount that a person has to say to fulfill the mitzvah of Magid? So a person has to say, Avadim Haginu L'Far B'Mitzrayim. That phrase is actually the Torah's description of what you're supposed to say the night of Pesach. The person obviously has to say that phrase of Avadim Haginu. Then the person, Mr. Burr says that the person should say at least the 10 makis, and from Rabbi Gamliel all the way till the second kos. Rabbi Gamliel says a person who did not say these 3 things by the night of the Seder, Pesach Matzah Mara, does not fulfill his mitzvah. From that phrase on till the end of the Haggadah, till the end of the second kos, everybody should be saying that. It's important to have in mind that the Iker Chiyuv of the night is the Hoidah to Kadosh Baruch Hu on the Geula, so it's not just saying the words, but it's feeling the words. A person has the obligation to feel the emotions, what it means to be, that Baruch Hashem has taken care of Klal Yisrael and given us our ability to leave Mitzrayim and to undertake to do the mitzvahs. After the person says Asher Galanu, the end of the second bracha, the bracha at the end of the Haggadah, then you're going to drink the second cup. The person should not be mafsik between the Hallel and Asher Galanu. The person should not be mafsik between the Asher Galanu and the second cup. So any messages that the person who's leading the Seder wants to impart about how to drink the cup, etc., a person should do that before the paragraph of Lefichach. Person says Lefichach anatu chayavim, because b'chol dor b'dor Kadosh Baruch Hu has taken us out, and we feel that feeling. We have a responsibility to thank Hashem, and therefore we're going to say Hallel. We say the 2 paragraphs of Hallel. We say the bracha of Asher Galanu. We drink the second cup, and we drink it b'haseva. A person should be careful to drink it b'haseva. Some Haggadahs have a hineni muchan and mezuman before the second cup. A person preferably should not say that. He should just think it. He should not say that. That would be an interruption between the bracha of Asher Galanu and the second, drinking the Brei Pri Hagafen and the second cup. After Magid, we come to Rachsa. So we raised the question before that can a person make a bracha, Asher Kedeshanu Mitzvah B'Tzivanu, al natilas yadoyim, when his hands are really clean, because he washed beforehand, and he was washed beforehand. He's saying the Haggadah, he's saying Hallel, he's keeping his hands clean. So can a person honestly say a bracha over here? Is it not a question of a bracha l'batola? So one suggestion is a person should bring himself, the Bir Halacha says at the beginning of Siman Tafai and Hey, a person should create a chiyuv upon himself, so he can say the bracha without a doubt. How would he do that? He would scratch his head, place his hands on a part of his body which is normally covered, and therefore at that point in time the halacha says he must wash his hands for the meal, and he would be able to make a bracha. Any arrangements that a person is going to have for giving out motzi, matzah, maror, and karech, preferably a person should do this before they wash, before they start making the brachas, to minimize the interruption between the bracha of motzi matzah and the people actually eating the motzi matzah. Motzi matzah. So a person is going to have in mind to fulfill the mitzvah of the Torah of eating matzah. So mitzvah tzrichas kavan is going to have in mind to fulfill the mitzvah of eating matzah. He takes all three matzahs in his hand. I'm going to take the cover off just so you can see better what I'm doing, but normally you would do this under your matzah cover. So a person's going to lift up all three matzahs. Now he's going to place his one hand on the middle matzah, and with the other hand he's going to hold the bottom matzah and the top matzah. So this way he's holding with one hand two matzahs, and with one hand he's holding the top one and the middle one, and with the other hand he's holding the top one and the bottom one. The reason why I do this is because when the person says the bracha of hamotzi lechem min ha'oretz, he holds all three matzahs. However, when he says the bracha of al achilas matzah, he only holds two matzahs. He does not hold all three matzahs. So he lets the bottom matzah drop. It's easier since he already had both matzahs. In his right hand he had the top matzah and the middle matzah. He had in his left hand the top matzah and the bottom matzah. He moves his left hand away, lets the bottom matzah down, comes back to hold the two matzahs now, the top matzah and the middle matzah. He says the bracha of al achilas matzah. Okay. When the person says hamotzi lechem min ha'oretz, he's going to have in mind all of the people which are eating there, that they're going to be yotze with his bracha. And he's also going to have in mind when he says the bracha of hamotzi lechem min ha'oretz. When he says the bracha of al achilas matzah, he's going to have in mind the other matzah he's going to eat that night, which would be the karech and the afikoman. So when the person says the bracha b'asher kiddushanu b'mitzvah v'tzivonu al achilas matzah, he will have in mind for the matzah, for the karech, and for the afikoman. The person should not speak because this bracha is going onto the karech as well. The person should not speak until after he finishes eating the karech. So now we're going to take our matzah and we're going to eat a kazayas. So the first night of Pesach, the kazayas is a mitzvah d'oraisa to eat a kazayas. So according to that, Mishnah Berurah says we have to be concerned about possibly that there's a larger share of a kazayas than we would normally assume. So how large does kazayas have to be? Now, the next step which we have to remember is that there's a mitzvah to eat a kazayas from the top one and the middle one. That's the rabbanan. So for that purpose, we can use a smaller calculation. So we can use a smaller kazayas from here and a smaller kazayas from here, which will actually add up to be the full size kazayas which we need. To calculate that the size of the kazayas, according to the Mishnah Berurah, according to the way the Mishnah Berurah, the way the Chazon Ish understands what the Mishnah Berurah would say, so we're going to need approximately the weight of 25 grams worth of matzah. So well, here's 33. So we can even do a little bit smaller than that. Still 33. So this is daiva hoser, the amount that a person would want to eat to be able to fulfill the mitzvah. This is actually 30 grams, which would even give you the shir Ravadis or safe shir. So this is the amount that we would be eating from the middle matzah and from the top matzah. That is definitely the shir. Now this halacha that you have to eat two kazesim only applies to somebody eating from the ka'ara. So if somebody's not eating from the Korah does not have to eat 2 kazesim. And therefore the second night, which is the Rabbanan, we do not need to be machmer on the larger shear. And the one who's saying the Agada will still need to eat the larger shear because he needs to eat 2 kazesim, but everybody else can eat the smaller shear. And they would just eat basically something of this amount. Actually, we could. This is a shear that that we're going to use for korech. This is the size we're going to use for korech. This is the size we're going to use for the second night, even for motzi matzah, for the other mesubim besides the balagada. Now this is talking about a matzah which comes about the weight of the matzah. If we can get one matzah over here, this matzah comes about 9 per pound. So one matzah. Break it so we'll be able to see it. One matzah over here is weighing 55 grams. So when you have 9 per pound, that's about the weight you're going to get. So a person knows how much they paid for their matzah. They pay $2 a pound. The box holds 2 pounds. They count the amount of matzahs which are in the box. And they know approximately how many matzahs are per pound, and they get an idea if you're dealing with which is something which is 9 per pound. So each matzah will weigh about somewhere in the area of 55 grams, and this is the size that you're going to end up needing to eat for korech, for motzi matzah the second night, and for korech, and for the first. Except for the second night, the one who has the Korah will be having a larger shear. And the first night, we will be using a larger shear because we're dealing with a deraisa, and that we mentioned, we calculated this year before, was 25 grams. That gives us this calculation over here of this amount of matzah. Okay, the matzah has to be eaten by seva, and therefore we will be reclining. Preferably, a person should actually be resting when he's eating the matzah, as if he'd be reclining on a couch. So a person could actually take off his hat and lean back and enjoy himself while he's eating the matzah. So that would be a fairly comfortable position to be in while the person is eating. We can approximate royalty by doing so. Okay, so a person takes a kazayas from each one and he eats it. Now, preferably you should try and break off the kazayas from the top matzah and the kazayas from the middle matzah at the same time. When you start eating them, you're supposed to eat them together as well, which means that considering the amount we're eating over here is not so large, a person theoretically could eat this over a short period of time. He should eat one kazayas, which we have from the top one, eat that and swallow it, and then eat another kazayas and then swallow it. If a person cannot do that, which I find that to be difficult for most people to do, a person tries to put a large amount in his mouth. Shlomo Zalman said that's considered achila gasa, and you will not be yotze the mitzvah. So a person has a time frame referred to as kedei achilas pras. Kedei achilas pras, since we're dealing with the mitzvah deraisa, so Moshe suggests that we should try and finish this in the time period of 3 minutes. If that's not possible, 4 minutes. The second night we'll be dealing with the mitzvah d'Rabbanan, so we can rely on the share of 5 minutes. So a person would have 5 minutes to finish off his kazayas. Now let's say a person is working with machine matzah. So machine matzah, one matzah weighs about 32 ounces. 32 grams, I'm sorry. Somewhere between 30 and 32 grams. So if we're saying that he's going to be eating together area of 25 grams, so he basically takes 15 grams from the top matzah and ended up with 15 over here. This is 30, which is going to be daiva hoser for a person to fulfill the mitzvah. A person really could do That's 24. Okay, so that's approximately the size that a person will be eating for the motzi matzah. This will be the size that a person is eating. The later shiurim are going to be much smaller. They're going to be 15. So for karech, this is 16. So this will be enough for karech. The shiur for karech, and again for the second night, for everybody other than the one who's saying the Agada, this would be the shiur for motzi matzah as well. The next step is morer. So we're going to do the mitzvah of morer. What is the preferred thing to use for morer? The preferred to use for morer is romaine lettuce. There's always been hesitation with using romaine lettuce because of the infestation. So some brands of romaine lettuce in general actually come cleaner than others. If a person wants to use romaine lettuce, it's the process of cleaning it and checking it is not difficult. A person could take the romaine lettuce, put it into a solution of soapy water for a few minutes, agitate it around 2 minutes, take it out, put it under running water and rub your hands over it so that the running water, if there be any bugs there, they would be removed. And then the person then checks it against a light box to see if there's any indication of any bugs over there. If he checks the amount he has to check 3 portions from that he would be eating. So on average, a person is eating maybe a few leaves. So he checks 3 sets of that, and if there are no bugs, it's considered muksuk that it doesn't have any bugs, and he doesn't have to check anymore. The morer should be dipped in the charosis. So a person would want to take his morer from the kara, or other morer he needs to supplement, and dip it into the charosis. He should shake off the charosis afterwards. The goal is not to eat the charosis, the goal is to eat the morer. Morer is the Rabbanim. Mashiach should come and will be zeicher to have the Beis HaMikdash, and morer will be part of the mitzvah of Korban Pesach and be the Raisa. But nowadays, morer is the Rabbanim, and therefore we can use a fairly small shear of morer. Now, in regards to the weight of morer, so Rabbi Bodner in his Sefer is able to actually give us a size of 1 leaf of morer, and that's the mitzvah of morer is 1 leaf of that size. It would be sufficient to use for morer. This is actually a little bit larger than a person would need. It's a little bit larger than a person would need. He does say if you have smaller leaves, I think if you look at the picture over here, you can see that basically our 1 leaf corresponds to his picture over here. So he suggests 1 and 2/3 of another one of this would be sufficient for the mitzvah of morer. If a person's using stalks, so just the stalk itself without the leaf, so he would have basically 2 of this size would be sufficient. If a person wants to do it by weight, that's too much. That's too much. No. Let's start another one. So this is definitely sufficient for the shear for more of a person to use. If a person wants to use chrein, so chrein you can measure it into a shot glass. So a shot glass is 1 ounce, which is going to be the equivalent of 29 cc's. That's much more than you need. A person needs I'm sorry, that's the shear the person would want to use, which is 29 cc's, which is basically 1 fluid ounce. So 1 shot glass worth of ground chrein would be the shear that a person would use for morer. The person makes the bracha. You should tovel the mor in the charosis before you say the bracha. And therefore, to limit the interruption between the bracha and the eating. A person, when he says the bracha b'alachilas mor, should have in mind for the karech as well. A person eats the mor, he should have in mind to fill the mitzvah, the rabbanon, of eating a mor. So we already mentioned the calculation of the size of our karech. So the karech, we're going to use this amount of, we had this amount of mor again. We're going to use the smaller shear of for the matzah, and this is the amount of matzah we're going to be using. We make our karech, and we have our wonderful sandwich. We make the karech from the bottom. The minhag is to make a karech from the bottom matzah. Karech has to be eaten b'seva. Mor is not eaten b'seva, but karech has to be eaten b'seva, because this was the way that they would fulfill the mitzvah of eating the korban pesach and the matzah, which require haseva. So the mor is drawn along together with the matzah and the matzah and the pesach, and it's eaten b'seva. There is a phrase in the Haggadah of Zecher L'Mikdash Kehillel, which the Mishnah Berurah raises a question if it's considered a hefsek, but the minhag is it's not considered a hefsek, and a person would say that. We move on to Shulchan Aruch. A person should be aware not to overeat, because he still has to do the mitzvah of afikoman, and he should not eat afikoman or chilagasa, so he wants to make sure he does not overeat during the meal. There's a minhag, the Ramah says, to eat eggs, and the Mishnah Berurah suggests you should eat the egg from the ka'ara, unless you would want to save it for the second night and then eat it then. The halacha is that we do not eat roasted meat, roasted chicken. However, a roasted egg is permitted, so a person can have his roasted egg. But we do not eat the zroya, because we do not eat something which is roasted by the night of the Seder. But a person, the Chayyim does point out, a person should not throw it out. A person should try and use it in some type of dish if he could. The definition of roasted for this purpose is obviously something which is roasted directly over the fire. A person is something which is called pot roast, also is considered roasted. It means if it's cooked in a pot without too much liquid, it basically just its own liquid, even though it's cooked inside of a pot, it still has the status of roasted for this purpose, and a person should not eat that the night of the Seder. The Suda of the Seder is a Sudas Yom Tov. The halacha is a person, there's a din of simcha by Sudas Yom Tov. So a person should have a revius of wine during the meal. So besides the second cup, the third cup, the fourth cup he's going to be drinking, he'll be drinking a cup during the meal, a revius of wine during the meal as well. Tzafun. So we come to afikoman. Afikoman should be eaten before chatzos. The charts tell you exactly when chatzos is, and a person should complete the afikoman before chatzos. L'chatchila, preferably a person should use 2 kazesim by afikoman, one which is zecher lePesach, and one was zecher for the matzah, which was eaten together with the korban Pesach. A person who's not feeling well and he finds it difficult can eat 1 kazayas. Now, is afikoman the raisa or the rabbanon? If it's the raisa, we have to use a larger shear. If it's the rabbanon, we can use a smaller shear. So this actually is a machlokes in the Gemara, in the Rishonim, whether afikoman is the raisa or the rabbanon. And the Mishnah Berurah paskins that it's the rabbanon, and therefore we can use the smaller shear for calculating the afikoman. That being said, a person should have 2 kazesim. So we're going to create a shear for afikoman, which we're going to use the smaller shear of calculation, and we're going to double it, and it's still going to be a little bit smaller than our shear for motzi matzah. So even if we said that the chatchila for motzi matzah, we're trying to get a weight of 25 grams, for the purpose over here, we're going to try and get a weight of, let's see, 1 second. It's going to be, we're going to have the shear of going to be about 30, 66. It's going to be about It's going to be about somewhere in the area of 17, 18 grams. So we find our afikoman that our child gave back to us. So this is the shear using matzahs, which are 9 per pound. This would be the shear a person would eat for afikoman l'chadchila. If a person finds that difficult, so he can use the same shear which we used for karech before, which, find that piece of matzah over here, we used for karech before, which I think was these two. So it would be this amount. For afikoman, if a person finds it difficult to eat the larger share, he could eat this amount for the purpose of afikoman. Afikoman has to be eaten b'haseva. A person should be very careful to remember to eat b'haseva because, according to one opinion, you're yotze b'diavad without haseva and you can't go back. According to one opinion, you must go back. So it creates this tremendous conflict. So a person should be very careful to make sure that he eats it b'haseva. A person should try and eat the shear of afikoman b'chtei achilas pras. And we mentioned before that shear would be preferably 3 minutes or 4 minutes. Okay, we come to borech. We come to benching. So the halacha is that if you use your kais during the meal, to use it for the purpose of a kais mitzvah, you have to wash it out. So that if the kaises were left on the table and maybe some pieces of matzah, things like that, got inside the cups should be washed inside and out before we use them for benching. A person should not interrupt between benching and the bracha of Repi Gofen on the third cup. A person should have in mind when he drinks the third cup, he's having in mind to be yotze the mitzvah of the third of the dalet kaises. Hallel. So we say Hallel. It's preferable to try and say Hallel in a responsive way. The psukim of Anna and the psukim of Haidu, we should have the balabayas say, and the family would respond. That works even if the family is a woman and children. As long as there's 3 people there, the husband, the wife, and a child, so the husband would say it, and the wife and the child would respond. A person should not recline while he's saying Hallel. The third cup, we neglected to mention the third cup. A person should make sure that he drinks the third cup of haseva. Again, it's going to be problematic. If he doesn't drink haseva, he's going to have a question of whether he's mechuyev to go back, and if he's allowed to go back. So a person should be very careful to drink the third cup haseva. Then we finish off the shear. We say drink the fourth cup. We say and that has to be drank b'haseva. We say the bracha achrona of ala gefen for all of the kaises that we drank. After we have what's known as nirtza. The ikir dinam nirtza, the person is mechuyev to spend the night discussing Halachos Pesach and the Yetzias Mitzrayim and the Nisim Niflos, what Kadosh Baruch Hu did with us, until the point that he falls asleep. However, Rabbi Yaakov Emden in his Siddur points out if a person knows that his nature is that the next morning he'll be falling asleep during davening and not davening properly because he doesn't go to bed, he should go to bed, and this way he'll be able to daven properly the next day. The halacha does say that a person should continue to discuss Yetzias Mitzrayim until sleep overtakes him. So if sleep overtook him in his chair, he fell asleep, and he wakes up again, he fulfilled that halacha, and then he can go to bed without a problem. What are you allowed to do after the fourth cup? Is a person allowed to drink anything? So the halacha is a person can drink water after the fourth cup. We want the taste of the matzah, the taste of to remain in our mouths. So the dalet kaises we must drink. We drink them as well. Water does not affect the taste of the matzah, and therefore a person could have water after the Seder if he needs to have water. Drinking something which would be alcoholic would definitely a person should not do. And something which does not has a minimal type of flavor. So Mishnah Berurah says tea without sugar or coffee without sugar is permitted. If a person is, or even if a person would make it with a weak type of a flavor, he adds a little bit of sugar, would also be permitted, but not more than just a little amount. Anything which could be used as chamar medina, preferably should not be used either, which does raise a question in regards to coffee and tea. So preferably a person should stick to water if he does not need to do anything more than that. And with that, we are hoping that we should be zocheh to mekayim the mitzvah of the mitzvahs of Haggadah, Matzah, Morer, and Hallel, and Haggadah properly. We should be zocheh to do it together with the Korban Pesach in Yerushalayim, Eretz Kodesh, B'mher B'yameinu. Amen.